Hey, everybody. Welcome to EduMatch. So thank you for joining us. Follow along with us at podcast.edumatch.org/tweet talk. So I'm super excited because today we get to talk with Dan Kreiness, who is a longtime EduMatch member as well as a contributing author to EduSnap 17. So welcome, Dan. So glad to have you on here.
Thanks a lot, and I appreciate the chance to talk with you, and I'm very excited about the opportunity to get my chapter in the book.
Oh yeah, your chapter was amazing. So I really enjoyed it about the transformational leadership. It was really cool.
Thank you.
So yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna read your bio for anyone who's not familiar with Dan. Dan is amazing. He's a middle school instructional coach in Connecticut. He began his teaching career in the New York City Department of Education as an ELA teacher, academic intervention specialist, and middle level literacy coach. So Dan holds master's degrees in adolescent education and educational leadership, and he's currently a doctoral student in the field of educational leadership. Dan is emerging as an expert presenter at education conferences, trainings, and ed camps on topics including leadership, growth mindset, student engagement, various instructional technologies, augmented and virtual reality for education, and using social media in education. So Dan is the creator of the successful Growth Mindset EDU Voxer group and Growth Mindset Twitter chat. He is an ASCD emerging leader and also a Google certified educator, Nearpod pioneer, Flipgrid ambassador, and Who Knew It learning ambassador. So Dan features his writing on his own Leader of Learning blog and has contributed guest blogs in several places such as the EduCal blog, Your Instructional Coach, and Teach Boost. He was a contributor to the EduMatch Teacher's Recipe Guide, Survive and Thrive in the Kitchen and Beyond. He's been a recurring panelist on the EduMatch Tweet and Talk podcast series and hosts his own Leader of Learning podcast that can be found on iTunes or Google Play. So once again, welcome, Dan. So glad to have you on here.
Thank you. I apologize for that mouthful of information, but I really appreciate you telling everybody a little bit or a lot of bit about who I am.
Oh, the pleasure is mine. Yeah, it's so cool to hear about your journey through education. So speaking of that, what's your background besides what we just discussed, and who or what inspired you to go into education?
Well, I've been in this education game now for about 12 years. I actually went to college for education, but for music education, and kind of got out of that for a little bit. And I was trying to find myself. You know how college is; you get like 10 different majors before you really find one you like. And so I actually graduated with a degree in journalism, and it wasn't for a couple of years that I decided I really wanted to get back into this education thing. And so I think that it was probably my mom who first inspired me to be a teacher, through a couple of different ways, I guess. She herself was not an educator, but she kind of always wanted to be involved in education, in speech and language pathology. And I could tell like that not only did she miss out on that opportunity, but she wanted to kind of live it vicariously through me. So she was, I think, my first inspiration. And then, like I said, after I got away from education for a little while when I was first graduating college, it was actually parents of a friend of mine, doctors Scott and Doreen Sacamano, who actually really inspired me to get back into it and to say, you know what, like you're not too old, you're not, you're still young enough. Go back to school, get your license, get your certification, do whatever you need to do, and I did. And now 12 years later, I've been able to do so much, and I have still so much career ahead of me. It's been amazing.
Couldn't find the mute button for a second, but absolutely. So that is wonderful. And I remember that we were talking about like kind of how we shared that communications background. So that
Hmm.
is super cool. And I love the fact that you're doing the podcast and kind of, using that background in that way as well to augment your
Yeah,
skills.
that's why I love doing it. I just released the 10th episode. I know this show is more about the book than the podcast, but I just released my 10th episode today, the Leader of Learning podcast. It's talking about how much my career has grown over the last 12 years as an educator. Just in the last few months, having an opportunity to like you said, kind of mesh my love of broadcast journalism with my passion for education. I've been able to learn so much from all the guests I have on and listeners of the show, other podcasters. It's been unreal, really, the amount of learning that's come from it.
Well, that is awesome. And it is definitely, it's become a new favorite of mine. So definitely check that out, everybody. Leader of Learning podcast. So great, great stuff. All right. So you are a very connected educator. So tell us about your own journey in connecting with other educators and what kinds of things have you learned along the way?
So first and foremost, I would definitely not be as connected nearly when it comes to being a connected educator as I am if it were not for EduMatch. The way that I got into becoming, I had been on Twitter for a while, but the way I really got into becoming a connected educator was um, really from the moment that I was hired as the instructional coach at my school. I said, well, how am I, one guy who only taught English language arts in my own classroom, going to be able to coach all these other teachers in my school who teach all these different subject areas? And so I really, I guess, initially felt like the first thing I needed to do was to better myself and learn as much as I could, not about the other subjects, but about how to coach teachers of other subjects that I wasn't familiar with. So I got back on Twitter and I got on Voxer, and I think what that has taught me over the last almost 2 years now of really being into that space of being a connected educator is just that. Like, whenever you have a question about something, you want to learn something, you want to grow in some kind of way, answers to your questions are literally one tweet or one Voxer message away. Anytime you have a problem, a question, a concern, you tweet it out, you send a Vox, and someone will help you. That's really what I've learned. And I guess to take the words out of your own mouth, now I have this powerful professional learning family who I count on to support me, and I support them in everything that we do and that I do. It's amazing.
Absolutely. I mean, there's just so much knowledge just like right there on the tip of your finger. So totally, totally agree with you on that. So, all right, that is awesome. So you wrote about leadership and your podcast is on leadership. So how did you become interested in the topic of leadership?
I've always been interested in it. I really couldn't tell you how I became interested in leadership, but I can tell you when. I was in elementary school. I think either fourth or fifth grade, and I was presented with the opportunity, or maybe I was nominated by a teacher to be on the student council. And from there, I had this passion for it. In high school, I was the drum major of my marching band. In college, I was a section leader in the marching band. And actually, an experience that I write about in the chapter in EduMatch 17 and the EduSnap 17 is really the first experience that I was fortunate enough to have at really providing this kind of transformational leadership. And that's when I was the president of my fraternity in college. I took over in a time where we were in a real state of transition. We had the chapter really folded about 5 years before I got there. And we were still trying to rebuild and build ourselves back up and build the chapter up. And so I took a chapter of 25 to 30 guys, and our goal was we want to grow and we want to build a name for ourselves and a reputation on our campus. And that's what I sought out to do. And I was able to really utilize the guys that I had around me to do it. And we were resourceful and we were a family, and we supported each other in everything we did, and we made it happen.
Absolutely. I loved reading that part. That was definitely an example of young Dan as a leader. So
Yeah.
awesome. Awesome. Okay. So what other types of things can people expect to read in your chapter? Tell us a little more. Give us like a little bit of an overview of your chapter in general, please.
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked. Basically, you mentioned before, and I obviously know that we share this in common. I'm a doctoral student, and I'm really hoping to study, in my own research, the link between transformational leadership and growth mindset. So, in other words, what are the practices, leadership practices that school leaders do to inspire innovation, let's say, in classroom teachers. And so really the chapter is about just that. It's about what is transformational leadership, and then how could it inspire people to want to innovate. And that link, I guess, that I mentioned in the chapter really has to do with another area of interest of mine, which is growth mindset. And so it's kind of about, and the chapter literally is called Transforming Education One Mindset at a Time. So it's how can we impact people and affect people to change themselves, and therefore kind of that snowball effect we're looking for, be able to change their classrooms, their schools, and education as a whole. And I know that sounds like a really grandiose idea, but I think the chapter is all about kind of starting small and making those changes just within each person first.
Yeah, totally, totally. So making those changes like one person at a time. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
So before we go on, I wanted to give a quick shout out to Peggy, who is interacting with us on the YouTube live. So thanks so much for tuning in, Peggy. Always great to see you. All right. So if you could tell us a little bit about what transformational leadership means exactly.
Yeah, and thank you also to Peggy. So transformational leadership, I'll tell you, I'll make a long story short. When I was having a conversation with someone at an ed camp I went to. Actually, it was a fellow EduMatcher, Tracy Brady. I was talking to Tracy, and I was telling her about this idea that I had to do my research in my doctoral program. And next to us was this college professor who teaches doctorate students. And he said, well, he got all official sounding, and he was like, well, what leadership theory are you going to pull from, or something? I don't know what he said, but I was like, leadership theory? Like, I don't even know what you're talking about. So that got me into kind of starting to study leadership styles and leadership theories. And transformational leadership is kind of this new trendy leadership theory, but it's really grounded and rooted in this idea that a leader taps into the strengths of whoever they're leading to really bring them in to being a part of the organizational mission. So like in college, when the whole entire chapter said, of my fraternity said that we want to build and grow and be the strongest fraternity on campus, then it was my job as the leader to give each of the guys in the chapter different roles and play off of their strengths so that they could collectively help the whole organization reach our goal. That's really what transformational leadership is.
That is cool. That is so cool. That reminds me of this book, The Multiplier
Yep.
Effect. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally. Okay. So that is awesome. So using everyone's strength and kind of, having everyone invest part of themselves.
Yeah, just buying into the mission and just being inspired to do whatever it takes to make it happen as a whole organization.
Right. Absolutely. So I'm digging that. And I have to say, my favorite part of the chapter was when you start talking about 3 different zones: the comfort zone, the know zone, and the grow zone. So if you could tell us a little bit about what that is.
Yeah, I was really glad to have the opportunity to not only write about it, but literally create a graphic. And so it's probably a little bit easier to understand when you're reading the chapter and you see it in front of you. But when I had started and you know this too from running the EdCamp voice on Voxer, when I started the growth mindset group. Um, this is something I threw out there, and we had a kind of a debate going about it for a while. But when it comes to growth mindset, I think that it doesn't. Don't mind my kids running by me in the background. Nope, off the camera. Anyway, I think that when people want to change but they can't, it means that they're kind of trapped in the comfort zone, right? And so the graph. Get out of the way. Did she? I don't know. I can't even explain it. My kids are becoming quite the performers at this point. All right. So when people are trapped in their comfort zone, they're sort of like in the center of their world. And in order to get out of that and break through into their, what I call their grow zone, like that's when they're all about growth and improvement and all that. They got to break through the no zone. So there's those three zones: the comfort zone, the no zone, and the grow zone. And that no zone is what holds everyone back, right? It's like all the excuses you come up with. It's obligations, it's family, it's time. Oh man, time, right? Nobody ever has enough time. So it's whatever is holding you back from growing in whatever way you want to grow, that you have to break through once you leave that comfort zone.
And I really love that, because a lot of times, you know, like you said, we kind of hold ourselves back in our mind. And so a lot of times that no zone is in the way. But once you get through that, then you really start to get into the grow zone, right? So I really, really, really appreciated that. So also want to give a shout out to Kathy, who has joined us on YouTube Live. And Peggy is saying, great point about being trapped in our comfort zones. She hadn't heard the term no zone and makes sense. So awesome, awesome, awesome. So what advice would you have for any educators that may be watching, based on your experiences in the classroom or in the school or in any educational setting?
I'm sorry about that. So I know this sounds cliche, and I almost hate to say it, but it needs to be said that in my years of experience, and in my classroom experience, and the advice that I would give to others is absolutely 100% about building relationships and fostering those relationships and maintaining those relationships with the students. You know, growth mindset and all that stuff. And by the way, the chapter not only, don't worry, I'll come back on camera in a second after I yell at my kids. My chapter doesn't just talk about growth mindset in educators and in adults. You know, that whole grow zone and no zone, that's with the students too. And I guess really, you know, my advice then would be build those relationships and make sure they're super strong in order to lead your students and grow your students. And of course, maybe change their mindsets about whatever it is that they want to do.
That's powerful. That is powerful. So I love that, because everybody has their own, you know, their own comfort zone, their own no zone and grow zone. And when you build those relationships, and you can guide people through that no zone more easily, right?
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. It makes a lot of sense. I hope what I'm saying makes a lot of sense, but what you just said definitely does too. And it just helps so much in so many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, definitely appreciate you being on today, Dan. So really appreciate you being here. So if you could just let everyone know how they can get in touch with you on online.
Yeah, and before I do that, I just want to say I appreciate you having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be a contributing author in this book. Like I said, I really would have wanted to have a chapter in last year's, but just didn't happen. I got too busy. Um, the ways that you can find me are my website, leaderoflearning.com. That's where I have my blog and everything about me. The podcast that's become a real passion project of mine that I'm very proud of. It's growing every single day. We just, like I said, we released the 10th episode today. That's really on the same, thank you for the applause. The website again is leaderoflearning.com, and this time it's leaderoflearning.com/podcast. It's on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, basically anywhere that you could find a podcast, you could find Leader of Learning. So I'm super proud of that. My email is dan@leaderoflearning.com. And maybe even most importantly, talking about being a connected educator, I'm on Twitter and Voxer at DKreiness, DKREINESS.
Awesome. Definitely connect with this man, everyone. Dan is awesome. So learning a lot with him and from him. So so thank you again, Dan, for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you. All right. So EduMatchers, tune in on Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern, where we're going to be chatting with Tara Linney, another contributing author to EduSnap 17. And I have to say that both Dan and Tara were ASCD Emerging Leaders this year. So congratulations to both of you. And definitely looking forward to chatting with her, and also looking forward for this podcast to come out on our own podcast on Podbean, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, same ones that Dan listed, everywhere that you can go to get your podcast. Then check out EduMatch Tweet and Talk. So that should be out in a few weeks. And also the book itself, EduSnap 17, coming your way December 30th, and it will be live at noon. So 12 Eastern Standard Time, you'll be able to snatch up a copy of the book. And in addition, you will be able to tune into our launch party. So check Twitter for ways to RSVP to that. And if you're on the EduMatch mailing list, you just got an email with all of the information. So tune in on Wednesday, same bad channel, 7 p.m. Eastern time. So everyone have a great evening.